Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for providing this opportunity. Senator Murray, thank you both for your leadership, particularly on this issue, which is critical. I want to thank Senator Whitehouse. Yes, I served on the committee, but I've already been eclipsed by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, so thank you. And Sheldon and I will both admit that we will forever dwell in the shadow of Claiborne Pell. That is one of the realities of the United States Senate and our history. Again, thank you for inviting me to testify on what I believe is a critical area of needed reform for our student aid programs and higher education more broadly, requiring our colleges and universities to bear greater responsibility for student loan debt. Chairman Alexander has already taken a very thoughtful approach to looking at this issue, as have others on the committee, and I thank you all for your leadership. We all know that post-secondary education is required for most family-sustaining middle-class jobs, and that an educated workforce is essential to a modern, productive economy. Yet, just as there is growing recognition that post-secondary education is indispensable in the modern economy, families are being required to shoulder growing debt burdens that severely impact the lives of borrowers to the point of threatening access to college and restricting our nation's economic growth potential. According to a recent analysis of student loan debt by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, between 2004 and 2014, there was an 89% increase in the number of student loan borrowers and a 77% increase in the average balance size. This is not only in absolute terms, but the trend line is very disturbing about what's happening. Today, over 40 million Americans have student loan debt with the outstanding balance exceeding $1.2 trillion. This is a growing drag on our economy. As student loan debt has grown, young adults have put off buying homes or cars, starting a family, saving for retirement, or launching new businesses. They have literally mortgaged their economic future. We know that student loan borrowers are struggling, and defaults are on the rise. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported that the number of borrowers who default each year has increased from about 500,000 10 years ago to 1.2 million annually in 2011 and 2012. Only 37% of borrowers are current on their loans and actively paying down their debt. We cannot tackle the student loan debt crisis without states and institutions also stepping up and taking greater responsibility for college costs and student borrowing. Institutions of higher education can take action to reduce the likelihood that a student will default on a loan. However, under current law, there is little incentive for them to do so until default rates reach excessive levels, such as their 3-year cohort default rate exceeds 30% for 3 years, as the chairman mentioned. In other words, nearly 1 in 3 students would have to default by their 3rd year in repayment before an institution would be obligated to take any action. The financial crisis showed us what happens when certain players in the system can reap the rewards of easy credit without having to bear any of the consequences of making reckless, risky decisions. The players that created and sold exotic financial products got rich, while middle-income families lost their homes and taxpayers had to bail out the financial system. They got the check, and we got the bill. I don't think that's right, and I think good business dictates another approach. We only have to look at the collapse of Corinthian College to see that we face a similar problem in the higher education sector. Students have been left in the lurch and taxpayers on the hook because of a business model based on maximizing enrollments and student loan revenue with little responsibility or little regard for the outcomes. I introduced the Protect Student Borrowers Act with Senators Durbin, Warren, and Murphy, and I want to thank Senator Warren for her great leadership on this issue and many other issues, to ensure that institutions take greater financial responsibility when it comes to student loan debt by setting stronger market incentives for colleges and universities to provide better and more affordable education to students, which will in turn help put the brakes on rising student loan debts. And I want to underline, emphasize market incentives, because the market can be made to work for us. We introduced this legislation to move the conversation forward, beyond whether institutions should bear greater responsibility for student loan debt, to how to design a system that puts the right market incentives in place for them to assume such responsibility. The Protect Student Borrowers Act would hold colleges and universities accountable for student loan defaults by requiring them to repay a percentage of defaulted loans. Only institutions that have 25% or more of their students borrow would be included in this risk sharing based on their cohort default rate. So we've established a limit. If you don't have an institution that relies on student loans, then we're not going to get you involved in detailed regulation. But if you have heavy student borrowing, you should be into this system. Risk sharing requirements would kick in when the default rate of these institutions exceeds 15%. As the institutional default rate rises, so too would the institution's risk share payment. It makes sense. If they're doing their best to try to control default rates, then they should be protected. If they're doing poorly, they should pay more and more. These payments will be invested in helping struggling borrowers, preventing future default and delinquency, and reducing shortfalls in the Pell Grant program. We need to tackle student loan debt and college affordability from multiple angles, and we need all stakeholders in the system to do their part. With the stakes so high for students and taxpayers, it is only fair that institutions bear some of the risk in the student loan program. I commend Chairman Alexander and Senator Murray for putting this topic on the reauthorization agenda. I look forward to working closely with this committee and our colleagues, and I am sure that with your leadership we will reach success. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.